Morning team, it's me, your favourite, Jordan at the screen. Come one, come all, the ladies, the gentlemen, the boys and the girls, for a new video, this time discussing something that I can't even put it into words. I can't even think of a way to introduce this. It's a case that I read about earlier this morning of a false accusation, and it's unbelievable. It is on the same level as the case of Jay Cheshire, and I thought that case was bad. This case, it just adds to it. I don't actually really know how else to introduce it, so I'm going to jump straight into discussing the case, working through it in chronological order, and then I'll offer my opinions and thoughts, discuss the case a bit, look at other false accusations, etc, etc. So let's just get straight into it. Elgin Varney met Hannah Stubbs in October 2014. They were both starting physiotherapy degrees at Keele University. They were both mature students. They became friends very quickly. The friendship became physical but not an official relationship. Elgin, a keen sportsman, threw himself into university life. He played tennis, joined the running club and captained a football team. Hannah wanted to join everything I wanted to do, he said. I didn't mind. The pair attended lectures, socialised together, and spent a lot of time at the university's climbing wall. Most days they met with their two friends, who were both fellow mature physiotherapy students. Elgin and Hannah also shared a history of anxiety and depression that had led both to dropping out of earlier university courses. When she started at Keele, she was taking antidepressants, and on his advice she started seeing a university counsellor. Hannah spent Christmas with her family. The two exchanged 750 electronic messages in the days before and after. Not got my grizzly bear to cuddle up to though, unfortunately. I feel like falling asleep with you. I like waking up with you too though. That's some of the messages. 26th February 2015. Elgin informs Hannah he is not interested in a relationship. Hannah and Elgin exchange lots of messages. Hannah wants Elgin to stay over. She is struggling with his decision to end this relationship. His replies were polite and the exchange ended on good terms. And it's worth to note that on the 27th of February, Elgin allegedly assaults Hannah. This accusation is made later though. On the 1st of March, Hannah hurts herself while she was play wrestling on the gym mats with fellow students. Everyone was making a fuss over Hannah. It seemed a complete overreaction, he says. The trainee medics were quite hysterical. Apparently the incident was a bit bizarre, the kerfuffle where she got hurt. An ambulance was called and Hannah was taken to hospital. Elgin went with her and took pictures she later posted on Facebook of her smiling, strapped on a spinal support board. A male friend, who I will refer to as M, the names had been changed in the article that I got this information from. I just feel that using the names they gave were a bit silly. M drove everyone home after Hannah was given the all clear at 3 AM. It was in the course of that evening that Hannah made an allegation of assault, telling M that Elgin had touched her inappropriately. M messaged his female friend F, who had written in a blog about being raped the previous year. A few days later, F spoke to Hannah. The day after that, Elgin received a disturbing Facebook message. Elgin, due to what happened last week when I came over to yours, I have decided I don't want any contact with you. I don't feel like you respected me or how I feel. I had been clear with you on the phone that I didn't want things to happen again, and yet you still went ahead. Another male friend, who I shall call K, had been present when these messages were sent, as was F. K says that F formulated this message and that Hannah had little input into it. K comments, I was shocked by this. I recall that F soon became heavily involved with Hannah and seemed to have a lot of influence over her. I fully believe that Hannah was not raped or sexually abused by Elgin. Numerous more students came forward in Elgin's defence. The role of F was significant. She had been with Hannah when she contacted the university authorities with her allegations, and it was F who rang the police on Hannah's behalf. Hannah eventually accused Elgin of raping her on unspecified dates, once in the autumn of 2014 and again in February 2015. There was no forensic evidence of rape. There were also 10,000 Facebook and WhatsApp messages exchanged between the two. None of them seemed to infer any disagreement between the two. Investigation ensues. Hannah gives a statement to the police in which she is clearly reluctant to make any concrete allegations and repeatedly referred to her lack of faith in her own memory. She also mentioned F's role. People have said to me, like my friend F, if you've said to them you don't want them to, then they shouldn't. She was also questioned about previous allegations of rape she had made against another man. During the police interview, she was initially reluctant to commit herself to making an allegation against Elgin. This eventually led to the officer pointing out to her what the police would need to prove a case. It was only after Hannah had received prompts from the officer that she hesitantly developed a disjointed allegation against Elgin. Police refused to look at electronic messages telling Elgin the tech team would be in touch. After making the accusations, Hannah spent several weeks in a mental hospital. Early August, Hannah twice downloads the CPS guidance on perverting the course of justice. This is found out later. Hannah died by suicide in late August 2015. The inquest found she had been suffering from PTSD, but it was not linked to her alleged rape. Later, information from the investigation was disclosed that during August 2015, Hannah had searched on the internet about false allegations and how to withdraw prosecutions, as well as research into the kind of personality disorders that drive such allegations. March 11, 2016, 6 months after Hannah's death, Elgin is charged. The charges were eventually dropped, and a spokesman for the CPS said, "The function of the CPS is not to decide whether a person is guilty of a criminal offence, but to make a fair, independent and objective assessment about whether it is appropriate to present charges for a jury to consider. Following the receipt of new information, prosecutors were no longer satisfied that there was a realistic prospect of conviction." So, the points to consider. First point is this allegation is false. Friend F made the allegation and pressured Hannah into maintaining it, which Hannah evidently seemed not to want to be doing. It would appear that Hannah had made an accusation before. Whether that one was false or not, I do not know, and I do not know what came of that investigation. It is likely that that incident had played part into her depression and anxiety. Again, I do not know. Friend F capitalized on Hannah's poor emotional state, manipulating her already damaged mental health. This, in my opinion, played a key causal role in Hannah's death. The police added to the pressure, goading, coercing and guiding Hannah into making a stronger allegation. The police seemed intent on sabotaging Elgin's defence by neglecting his evidence. And the CPS does not stand for justice, but it stands for imprisoning irrespective if the prisoner is guilty or not. Cases like this really they're unfucking believable. That there's this young girl who's quite clearly in a bad way, and when suffering heartbreak from this end of a relationship, this relationship she probably was somewhat dependent on, having anxiety and depression, and meeting somebody else who'd been through the same thing, I can imagine they had a strong bond and how much it would hurt that they'd split. And then this friend F comes along and manipulates Hannah into making this accusation. Not even that Hannah made the accusation, it's the friend phoned up on Hannah's behalf and sent this message on Hannah's behalf, pushing her into this. It would seem that F had some sort of axe to grind, having spoken about the rape on her blog, and maybe she felt some sort of bitterness from her previous circumstances, so decided to take it out on this case, which is absolutely fucking disgraceful. And then going to the police, and the police recognising that there's clearly no evidence whatsoever that this situation is fucked. And the last thing that should be happening is the woman being pushed into making a dangerous allegation that could ruin both of them. She should have been sent somewhere for help. But no, the police didn't do that. They helped her to change her allegations so it would be stronger, so they would have a greater chance of conviction, which is what the CPS then went ahead to say. Now that's what they are here to do, increase, was it? The function of the CPS is not to decide whether a person is guilty of a criminal offence, but to make fair, independent and objective assessments about whether it is appropriate to present charges for a jury to consider. Yeah, they want a realistic prospect of conviction. They're not here to discern justice. They're not here to realise truth. They are here to imprison. And that's what they were pushing, that agenda. They didn't care for Elgin's evidence in his defence. They didn't care that the allegation being brought to them was quite evidently false and that this woman needed help. They capitalised on this situation, contorting and manipulating it so they could push a conviction against him at the cost of her life. She is dead because the police pressured her, because this friend pressured her into making an allegation that she did not want to make. I can imagine the shame that she must have felt, the damage that she could see she was causing, and she didn't want any of this. The fact that she was being used as a pawn in this evil game. And she's dead now because of what happened. This is why I think it's on the same level as Jay Cheshire's case, because he had a false allegation made against him. A young boy, innocent, suffering from depression, and he had this false allegation pushed to him, and he could not cope. And he died by suicide as well. And then a year later, on the fucking anniversary of his death, his mother then dies by suicide, using the same fucking rope, if my information is correct. This case, the Jay Cheshire case, I've always used as the epitome of how evil false accusation can be when people denounce the idea that false accusations have any harm. And now, it seems that case has been fucking outdone. This is a black day for the CPS, for justice in Britain. I would like to read for you a quote from Catherine Comans, the former Assistant Dean of Student Life at Vassar College in New York, so a feminist with influence and status. She said, sure, it was 17 years ago, but she argued that men who are unjustly accused can sometimes gain from the experience. They have a lot of pain, but it is not a pain I would have necessarily spared them. I think it ideally initiates a process of self-exploration. How do I see women? If I didn't violate her, could I have? Do I have the potential to do to her what they say I did? Those are good questions. I'm trying to consider that quote and sentiment in the scope of this article, this case, and also whilst trying to reconcile it with what happened to Jay and Karen Cheshire, and there's no fucking way I can do it. That mentality is at odds with the real world. False accusations are fucking real, and it's not like, oh, you can just clear your name and move on. Well, you can't clear Jay's name, too fucking late. You can't help Hannah. You can't help Elgin, who's going to have her death on his fucking mind, on his life. He's going to be carrying that weight on his shoulders for the rest of his fucking life. False accusations are real. Now, sometimes they are malicious and sometimes they're not, but these things happen. I'm going to talk to you about another case, actually. Let me find it one sec. I have found the case that I'm talking about. This is the case of Philip MacDonald and his then 14-year-old brother, who were both accused of rape by Lindsay Attridge because she wanted to win sympathy from her boyfriend. She feared his affections were waning, so she picked Philip and the younger brother at random after finding an image of them by chance on Facebook. Her punishment: 200 hours of community service for wasting police time. This is a case that could have ended very differently. We've seen what has happened with the other two cases that I've just been mentioning. And this kid's 14, he was, when he was included in the accusation. And this is happening. People act like as if false accusations are nothing. take the case of Mark Pearson, who was walking through Waterloo when an unnamed woman, well, she's, I say unnamed simply because I'm not legally allowed to say her name in the UK, because she gets those rights as a victim, you know, she gets to be anonymous. Where yet the CCTV outright shows that the attack never happened. She claims that Mark was able to, in the split second as he walked past her in Waterloo, he managed to walk past her, stick 3 fingers up her, and punch her in the shoulder, so much so that she went flying back to the shock of people around them. CCTV showed no such thing happened, and actually he was holding his bag and also a newspaper on his arm. And the police actually slowed down the footage to make it seem like as if he'd fucking done it. This is a system that is completely fucked, that is pushing these quite obviously false allegations against these men in order to increase statistics, it seems, to... What's the quote from the CPS? That quote fucking gets me, I'm telling you. The function of the CPS is not to decide whether a person is guilty of a criminal offence, but to make fair, independent and objective assessments about whether it is appropriate to present charges for a jury to consider. Following receipt of new information, prosecutors were no longer satisfied that there was a realistic prospect of conviction. That's their job. That's what they're pushing for, convictions. They don't care whether the person did it or not. The allegation seems to be evidence enough nowadays. Forget innocent until proven guilty. It's allegation equals evidence. Can we get you yes or no? No, we can't get you. Let's see if we can change that no into a yes. That's the system that they seem to be employing. That is their method. Can we find evidence? No. Can we create evidence? This is the British judiciary. This is our policing system. This is the CPS. People are being falsely accused, and their lives are being torn apart. Like the guy who I mentioned a minute ago, Philip, and his younger brother. They were harassed in the street and shunned at school gates. 2 years later, he still had to keep fighting to salvage his demolished reputation. People speak about rape culture like as if, you know, all these men are able to attack women and get completely the fuck away with it, and society seems to be okay with rape, as if they think, rape is a good thing. Yeah, that's what they seem to think. They treat it like as if it's nothing. Where rape is so vilified that instead of treating it as an actual crime to be investigated and for the criminals and the perpetrators and the attackers to be dealt with, they think they've gone so overzealous that an allegation, that's all you need now. An allegation is proof. One way or another, we're gonna fucking get you. And that's what they've done. That's the pressure, the manic zealotry to get a conviction, irrespective of the mental health of the person making the allegation, against, irrespective of how Hannah felt. Even though they could quite blatantly tell that it was a false allegation, they still pushed it, because who gives a shit about the people involved when you can boost conviction rates? Because that's what Alison Saunders, the head of CPS, said she wants. She wants to boost conviction rates. Well, she wants to do it at the cost of the people involved. Who cares that people die? Fuck it. At least you get a conviction. Great. What a beautiful system. And we wonder why, you know, people don't like feminists in power, because they're creating this narrative. Alison Saunders is a toxic fucking feminist. This is what's happening. This is the product of always believe the victim, and even if the victim isn't right, just work with the idea that the rape fucking happened and try to prove it with evidence or fabricate evidence, twist the story so you can get the convictions, because that's good. That's what we want. Unfucking believable. I'm fearing for my own sanity now, so I'm going to have to cut this video here. I did want to look more into statistics and studies into false allegations, but maybe I'm going to save that for a video for another day. In the meanwhile, look after yourselves. Toodle pip.